Hello. Today I have two colleagues from Linux with me, namely Patrick and Konstantin, and we talk about a real-world micro frontend project. Hi Patrick, hi Konstantin.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Manfred.
So we prepared some questions up front. The first question that might be interesting for our audience is, who is Linux? Can you tell us a bit about our company?
Yeah. So LinaX was founded 10 years ago. We are a SaaS company, a product company that offers SaaS products. We have three products in the market. And our mission with those products is to be the Google Maps for software. That means we want to offer a product or products that allow companies to get the overview over their IT landscapes, to get more transparency into the IT infrastructures and software they are running, like applications they are using, and help them like to modernize their IT, like shift to the cloud, manage risk, like where are technologies obsolete or going to be outdated, and like initiate transformations to like update the software in time before running into risks. We are around 500 employees by now,
Wow,
working in
that's
multiple
quite a
offices.
number.
Yes, grown a lot in the last years. That's where we come then also to the architecture of micro front ends later on. Multiple offices in Europe and an office in the US. Like I said, we offer three products, and our enterprise architecture management product is our main product. That was a product also that the company started with, and that we are going to talk about mainly today, because that's the one that is built with Angular and leverages the micro front-end approach to scale together with the company and the product offerings, the teams that are working on that product. So that's the focus of today. We work in small product teams, so like 4 to 8 people, user experience, designer in the team, a product manager, front-end and back-end engineers, so that each team can own and develop one part of the product. And that's also where micro frontends then allow those teams later on to be more autonomous and deliver value to our customers faster. So that's about LinaX.
Cool. That means you manage to verticalize your application into slices that are more or less independent of each other. Is that right?
That is our aim. We started with that a couple of years ago. We are in the process, so these are long iterations and not projects, but long efforts to re-architect like the product in that way. But it's always what we strive for, that we have this vertical, like a back-end service in the front, micro front-end in the front end, so that the teams can, in those verticals, be autonomous and fast and develop their part of the product. Not all our product is built like this, but we are on the way of building this. And like we introduced micro frontends a couple of years ago and are now in the process of architecting these parts. Yes, we aim for that.
Awesome. And why did you choose for micro frontends? What was the very reason for going with this architectural style?
Yeah, so we started in 2016 to build our product that was initially built by the founder in PHP, and we rebuilt it or rewrote it with Angular beta 20 at that time. I remember it. So Angular 2 beta 20. And we rebuilt it as a single-page application with microservices in the back end. And that worked pretty good for a couple of years until 2020, where the company growth accelerated, and we saw that we will become more engineers, more product teams, and to deliver this product. And there's where we then saw, okay, our single application, which was totally fine until then, because we were like 3 teams, 10 engineers, 10, 12 engineers. That was perfectly fine to develop that in one Angular application, so to say. But like seeing that growth that was ahead of us, like there we were thinking, okay, we cannot grow the single application like this like with 10 or 20 teams. So there was then the challenge for us: how can we how can we architect our front end in a way that these teams can stay autonomous, that they can have a fast deployment and release pipeline to get the code live, that they can run their local dev server in a quick like recompile and reserve way, that they can quickly develop locally, because our application at that time had already grown a lot, and the recompile times were like 1 minute, and the startup time, the initial npm start, was already like 4 minutes, and our release times were, together with running E2E tests, approaching the 40 minutes. And yeah, we saw like, if we double now the amount of developers and product teams working on that one application, that's not going to scale. So we had to rethink how we develop our front and how we cut the different domains and product parts, so that the individual teams can stay or develop in a quick cycle and get their code out quickly, get feedback from the users, can iterate quickly. So that was then in 2020, like 2.5, 3 years ago, was then the challenge to re-architect and switch to smaller applications, micro front ends, so that those teams can deploy independent, develop independent. And our goal was that the release times stay constant and we scale like vertically by adding more micro front ends, and not like our single front end grows and grows. But that was the goal at that time. Developer experience, fast release cycles, deploying independently of each other and staying autonomous.
Sounds good. So how many teams and micro frontends do you have nowadays?
Yeah, we have now 8 teams that are actively working on that monorepo, where there are multiple applications, which are the micro frontends in there. We have up to 40 front-end developers or engineers contributing to that code base on a regular basis, like weekly basis. So there are lots of pull requests that get merged every day. And we have like 15 micro front-ends by now. So it's 15 different applications that are deployed independently of each other. We actually achieved with that now that each micro front-end stays like, has a release time of 10 to 15 minutes roundabout, and it's not growing like one big monolithic application, and the release time is increasing over like more and more. So it's actually, we are adding more teams, product teams. So for this year, we have again the goal to add more product teams for new product capabilities that we want to add. And those teams will by default always now, or most of the time, really start with a new micro front end, where they can then quickly iterate again, independent of what other teams are doing.
Sounds awesome. So if you say 8 teams and 15 micro frontends, that tells us that on average, one team is taking care of about 2 micro frontends. Is that right?
That is correct. There are some teams that have 2 or multiple micro frontends, because that's like how we develop the product. So some teams own 2 product areas, so that's why they own also 2 micro front ends. It could be that those teams could have developed those parts maybe in 1 micro front end, but it's really easier than if a new team or if a team splits into 2 to have already the areas separated. So that's why sometimes teams have 2 micro front ends in their ownership.
And also, like, not all of these micro frontends are used by all the users of our tool. So one common use case is like we like to give a lot of power to our users by making features configurable. If we can configure anything, we want to make this configuration to the user available as well. And so in our administration area, which is only accessible by admins in a workspace, a Linux workspace, a lot of more smaller things that in the general customer-facing application you wouldn't put into a micro frontend are in a micro frontend, simply because they do not need to load as super fast as we expect. the general features to do.
Okay, cool. So can you give us a demonstration of this product?
Surely, I'd be happy to do so. So what you're seeing here is the first page when you log into LeanX Enterprise Architecture Management. I'm on my dashboard, and up here you have the main navigation points. Everything in LeanX is a fact sheet, like all data points, and you can find and edit those fact sheets inside of the inventory. And so the inventory and the dashboard itself, those are still part of our old monolith shell application that has the long release time. And if I now click on reports, then this navigation here is a micro front end. And once I click on a report, this is actually then in the shell application again, because this view was built before 2020, long before that. So as Patrick said, we started introducing micro frontends in 2020 and built new features from then on in micro frontends where it made sense. But we did not invest heavily into migrating the older views into micro frontends. So, but as you can see, it feels completely native. There is no, as a user, you do not realize that this is a completely different Angular application. Let's actually have a look in the dev tools, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. You can see here that we have this reports host element here, which is the web component itself that is registered. And then actually, this is the web component, LX reports entry, and LX reports host is a component inside of the shell application that embeds this web component. And you can see here the NG version is on there because it's a separate Angular application. So it does happen that we have, when we do an upgrade, the micro frontends are live before the shell app. So we have different Angular versions here. And anything that is inside here is controlled by the micro frontend. It has its own dependency injection container. And yeah, so in reports, users get an overview of their IT landscape with some out-of-the-box reports, and in the inventory, they can edit and find data in a different fashion.
Cool. That means, in theory, you could also mix and match different frameworks. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So you could put a React micro frontend in there. For reasons of knowledge sharing and hiring and best practices, we do stick to Angular micro frontends nowadays. And even before we launched this web component micro frontend initiative in 2020, or ever since we had this reports functionality in 2016, these are actually embedded as iframes. And this will also remain that way because we actually want these to be more separated from the shell application, because they might even include, now I'm failing to find the iframe. There it is. These can also be written by our customers. So we actually want the sandbox of the iframe for these reports.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is one reason why people use still iframes, namely the isolation. I think you get the best isolation with iframes, and you need isolation if you load third-party vendor stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about numbers. I can assume that if you load micro frontends that are web components wrapping whole Angular applications, that this will somehow affect the bundle sizes. So what's about the bundle size numbers?
Yeah, exactly. So let's look in the network tab here, and I'm just going to do a quick reload, and then we can, and I'll need to disable caching so that you can actually see the size. And if I filter by main, then we have the shell the main entry point bundle of our shell application, which over the network is 1.8 megabytes, so quite big, and parsed that is 7 megabytes. So it's really quite large, but that's tends to happen with these enterprise applications. And if I now go back to the reports overview micro front end, so I'm going to click this button here, then you can see here that we load the entry point file for the reports micro front end, and this is 550 kilobytes. And we looked into the average size of our micro front end bundles, and that is around 560 kilobytes.
Awesome. So I guess in your case, this is more than fine, because I guess you have repeating users and the first load time is not that important. It's not that about conversions. If it takes 2 additional seconds, it should be fine. Is that right?
Yes, very much. And what we do, so of course, if we can make it faster, we always try to. So what's really important and something that we improved late last year is that we actually have the fingerprinted entry point bundles here, which with a cache control header that sets the cache to 1 year. So previously, the entry point file was just called main.js and never cached. But we worked around this by deploying this special JSON file for every micro frontend, which contains the fingerprinted bundle name that was generated by Webpack. So this file is never cached, and what happens is the user goes to our front end, clicks on the report link, comes to report navigation. This 1 kilobyte file is downloaded instantly. And if this bundle has been loaded before, because no update has been shipped to our micro frontend in the meantime, then it will just be loaded directly from the disk and actually has no load time at all.
Awesome. What's about sharing libraries? Do you somehow share libraries, or are the web components, the micro frontend, self-contained and isolated?
So in our code, we have an NX monorepo from Norval, the NX tooling, NX workspace with applications and libraries. And those applications, of course, can use the shared libraries that we have. I'm not sure if we can show that. So the applications can make use or include code from shared libraries that is also developed by us and or different teams from our engineering team. And the actual shared libraries can be reused in other feature libraries or even applications. And there we use shared code. Also the dependencies, we have one package JSON in that mono repo, so all the dependencies are the same. At runtime, the web components are isolated, so they have their own Angular, their own injection tree, their own router, everything. So at runtime, or we use NGRX store, for example, so they all have their own store. There's no global store for all those micro front ends. And we also, like, that's more in the direction of which guidelines do we follow. We tend to keep the interface between the micro front end or the web component and the shell application rather small. So we don't provide a lot of info from the shell application, so that those micro front ends, for example, in theory, I mean, locally, when we develop, we just start the micro front end. We don't need the shell. So that's why we kept the information that the shell provides to those micro front ends rather low. So actually, we just have the user language and the current route, which we provide. And we developed a dev wrapper. During development, it's more or less hard-coded, and the dev wrapper provides to the micro front end like English as a fixed language and a specific route that you can change in your dev tooling or in the browser. And so that's why we kept also those web components or micro front end more or less standalone. So at runtime, they are isolated, but in the code, actually, they can reuse shared libraries in our NX workspace.
Oh yeah, that's nice. And in this NX workspace, you have the micro front end shell, I guess, all the micro front ends and the libraries. And then one question that comes with this is, what's about the CI/CD workflow? Is there one huge workflow, or do you have several workflows or pipelines for those different micro front ends?
Yeah, so for us, it was really important that each micro front end can ship independently of any other thing. So we also wrote a blog post about this. I guess it's on the second page by now. Page 1. Yeah. So we have this affected check by NX that tells us, okay, what you should know in the beginning is, since our micro front ends, the build and the unit tests and the linting is so much leaner than the one from our shell application, these micro front ends are shipped immediately when the feature branch is merged. So if we merge a feature branch and a micro front end is affected, then the CI checks run, and if everything's green, it's immediately deployed. The shell application is deployed on demand. So there's like an npm command that you execute, and then all that workflow runs. So this is the only one that has a manual interaction. Micro frontends have continuous deployment with us. And so each micro frontend has its own GitHub workflow. It's this YAML file. And we have some like helper actions and reusable workflows that make it easy for each team to start their own micro frontend as well, and just use those, like having an npm setup where caching is properly configured with the cache action and everything like that. But as a developer, you just merge your feature branch, and after 10 to 15 minutes, your new micro frontend is live and you didn't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm. So if you say, or when you say it's live, then you really mean it's live. It's not somewhere on the development server. It's really out there in production. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's also really important there is something that I would like as a primer to other companies out there who want to do this continuous delivery approach. You should not delete the files that were previously on your CDN storage. So whenever we run a release, the files that were on there before are still on there, and anything that has changed and is now a new file will of course overwrite the existing files. So yeah, and this is also enables us to do fast rollbacks. So we also have, so we wrote the GitHub action to deploy our static files ourselves. It's the storage deploy action. And our rollback is super simple. When you deploy a micro front end, we have a git tag that has a version, for example, 100. And then when I release version 101, our GitHub action will copy the previous Alex frontend meta JSON with the suffix 100, so that we know this was the Alex frontend meta JSON from version 100. And the old bundle is also still on the CDN storage. And then when we want to do a rollback, which happens quite rarely, honestly, but if we want to, we can just trigger a workflow that does the rollback within 1 minute by simply taking the version that you provide for the rollback and making this old Alex frontend meta JSON the one that is served to the customer.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. Cool. So, did you develop or discover some best practices during your work on this product or project?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the goal was to make like the teams autonomous and independent. And there you asked it previously, keeping that in the whole stack, like front end and back end vertically, like from front end to back end, is a thing that we aim for and that we discovered is a good practice to aim at least for that. It's not always possible due to how the product develops, historical reasons, how we architect things in the past. But yeah, to keep it like really vertically independent, really make micro frontends and microservices aligned with each other. And another thing that we is best practice, I mean, that we discovered or did is that we have a way that a micro front end can own the suffix of a route. So for example, the host says /something, there's the something micro front end, and everything that comes after the /something belongs in the ownership of the micro front end. So we pass the remaining part of the URL to the micro front end via input output, which works surprisingly nice with Angular, Angular's web component support that they offer, that you actually on the web component element that you use, and there you have an attribute that you actually can use it as a simple add input in the code, and it just works. Was super surprising and super cool. And we have this practice of, or we had a helper that we can make each input an observable. So whenever the input changes, we get a new observable event. And from that, basically, it feels quite natural to own the remaining part of a URL in your micro front end and can react to URL changes there, so that we again keep the interface rather simple. It's just the remainder of the URL is passed to you, to your micro front end, and what you do with that is in your ownership. So that allows micro front ends to have even multiple routes. It's not just one page or one component that you have on one route, but it allows really to have multiple routes in a micro front end. And another thing that we discovered is that you can, from a micro front end, even register multiple web components. So a micro front end doesn't just have one web component. It might have a web component for the main product area where the feature lives, and another admin web component that lives in the administration area where admins can configure that feature. So you don't have to develop two separate micro front ends for that. It's just one application that offers two web components or registers two web components in the browser, and that the shell can then, on the main user page, use the main user feature web component, and on the admin page. So that's something that we discovered as well, which works pretty nice, because initially we thought, we need a web component application for that part and then for that part, but no, we discovered you can publish, so to say, multiple web components from your micro front end for different areas, or for maybe small widgets.
Yeah, if you let me share my screen real quick again, I can show this in the app. So our feature for to-dos, for example, this is the fact sheet details page. And this widget here on the side, this to-do widget, this is a web component that is registered by one micro front end, one main entry point file. And if I jump to dashboards, this here as well, this part of the dashboard is also a web component, but they are both registered within one main.js that is loaded for the to-dos micro front end.
Nice.
And what I would also like to highlight here is that a lot of people were involved with this, but one of the masterminds for sure is Fabian Böller. And so he's a former LeanIX employee. And together with Fabian, me and him, we also launched like a video tutorial on that showcases from you have a basic Angular application that has no micro front ends to an Angular application that has micro front ends using routers. And Fabian also wrote this nice blog that explains you when do you need them, what problems do they help solving, and it's all open source as well.
Nice. I will link this resource with pleasure here at GitHub. Awesome. So you told me before you want to show us a bit of the source code in there. You already showed us some source code. Is there something more you want to show us?
Yes, for sure. So I think I can walk you through rather quickly what makes the micro front ends in our NX workspace tick. So all the things like really, if you would contract me for a workshop to show you how to do our micro frontend strategy in your company, this would be it, and it would be like the fast track. So let's go with the example of the reports micro frontend, which is included using the Angular router. So we have our apps directory here, which contains the shell application and all the micro frontends. The reports micro frontend is right here, and it's eventually the details page of a report might also be moved into this micro frontend, because as Patrick said, everything under /reports could be owned by this micro frontend altogether. And now if this wouldn't, how can we ship this as a micro frontend? And first up is actually a package by you, ngx build plus. And by using this for our build command, we can set the single bundle parameter to true, which merges all the vendor and anything that is required for your micro frontend to run into one JavaScript file. And what's also important is that you have output hashing all, so that you actually get the fingerprint in your entry point file, so you can have caching for it. So that's the first thing you need to change. And now you have this reports application, you have a main.js that registers the web component, and let's actually look into that next. So we have the report entry component, and this is the, if we look at the reports module, in the ngdo bootstrap, we use the Angular API, create custom element. So this comes from Angular elements. And if you use create custom element, it will simply take an Angular component and allow you to assign that using, so this is an Angular API, and this custom elements is a native browser API to define web components.
And this is the part where you can also register multiple Angular components as web components, so that the shell in the admin area can like instantiate the admin part, and in the user-facing area can instantiate in the main user-facing feature component. So that's exactly where you would do that.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is happening when you load the main.js that is generated in the build step by reports. And now let's look at the reporting routes to see how this is included. So here we have the parent route reports, and there's a few routes in here. If you have no path, it's the reporting container. And if you have one with the ID, it's also the reporting container. So this route is actually still part of the shell application because it's way older. And only the overview route, it has the load web component guard. And what you see here is we use the load web component guard and we pass it some information. The important thing is that we pass it a front-end name. And with this front-end name, the load web component guard knows where to go to load the JavaScript bundle that actually contains your web component. So this guard will return a promise that will resolve once the script has finished loading. So let's have a look at what is going on there. So we have a web component registry service, which receives the web component name as a parameter. And now bear with me. I'm gonna go through this. First up, if the web component, if we have already loaded this bundle, we can resolve right away because the web component is already registered. Then we fetch the Alex frontend meta JSON, so the base URL is probably interesting as well. So we have this pattern that all micro frontends are under the bundles are under /frontends /frontend name, and anything after that is our CDN container that contains all the files that are part of that micro frontend, which in most cases is the main.js, some translation files, some images maybe. That all lives under /frontend name. So we have this rule pretty much. You cannot have your front-end bundles anywhere else. And this enables us to load the Alex frontend meta JSON. And with that, we can then get the entry point bundle name. So I was showing it earlier. Let's show it once more. If I go to the network tab and we look at the Alex frontend meta JSON for reports, it contains one property, the entry point bundle name, and that points to the fingerprinted file. And then what we do with that is we have this load method, and this creates a script element, sets the source to the URL of the bundle, and then when the script element emits the onload event, we resolve the promise, and if an error occurs, then of course we show an error, but this is very reliable and a simple way to load your web components.
Cool.
Yeah. So we came from the reporting route, and the load web component guard returned true, the promise resolved. The web component at that point is registered. And you can see then here we have this reports host module. And this is also just naming we came up with. This reports host module has one route, which is quite simple. All this component does is, this is the selector of the web component. So you saw that earlier in the ng-do bootstrap of the reports module. So Alex reports entry right here. This is referenced in the host component. So the host component is always the one that includes the web component. And what you need to do so that Angular doesn't complain that you do this is that you have the custom element schema. You will see this in our host modules, because otherwise Angular will complain that there is actually no component in your module that has this selector. So Angular elements, because we have Angular elements, we have this neat support for getting these things to run. So I am on the reports page, and we have our Alex reports host, and inside of that we have the reports entry. Now we're almost at the end. We've already loaded the web component. Now we would like to be able to tell the router and the shell application that when I click on this thing, that it should navigate to a different route. So this is an Angular router. But the micro frontend and the shell application, they do not share the same router. And for that, we have our web component routing directive. So if we jump into that, what this will do is, so this web component routing directive, it lives in the shell app, because it is assigned on the reports host component, on the report entry. This knows the router of the shell app. And then if you see here in ng-on init, we subscribe to the navigation end event of the shell application router. And then we set this as a property. It's like an input really on the native element of the reports entry, which is the web. And this then, if we look into the report entry component, is this input here. So the web component routing directive takes care of passing the route that is active in the shell application into our web component through an Angular input. And it behaves natively just like any Angular input. And then, so this way we know which page is active. We can do anything that we want with this route, really. And similarly, we have our route change output, and this is what I was talking about now. So we want to click on an element and have the shell router do something. here we have this register routing method, which is part of a shared service, and it will when I emit the route change event, then the shell application, and now let me make sure that I'm showing the correct part. So we have register routing, and then register outgoing routing.
Yeah, if the router, this is the router within the micro front end, if that router changes, we emit this route change to the shell as an output. It's in the component here, there as an output, emit, and the shell application via the directive you showed earlier, the routing directive, listens to that router change event and just on the shell router. So that's like via this directive and the corresponding counterpart on within the micro front end, they can communicate, and it's just standardized, and all our teams just use this. That's why it's in the shared library, so it's available to all our NX applications, and all our teams use this way. It's just adding a few directives on your web component micro front end, and it can communicate with the shell in a standardized way. And that's where I think again, coming to guidelines or principles, I think keeping like convention over configuration, like staying always the same, keeping the interface rather simple and standardized, makes it easier to reuse those shared concepts, and not every team invents their own way of doing things. And that's also why we wouldn't now at least try to resist like introducing React micro frontends, which would in theory work because it's a web component. But I think we have now these ways of how it works with Angular, and we have all these things in a shared library available so that teams can just reuse them. They are battle tested, so to say, they work. And that's something I would also advise, that you stay like consistent and standardized to scale this really, and not like lose yourself in different approaches and discussing how things should be done. This is how we do it, and that's allows us to scale this to multiple teams.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah, one thing that I would mention at this point, so I just walked you through our main code base, and in this micro frontends with Angular repository, this is all built in a much more simple and generic way. So here the train platform is the shell application, the bookings is the micro frontend, and if you look at the micro frontend routing directive, it's all within one file. There's no separate service. So if you want to apply this for your company or your project, definitely this is a great resource.
Awesome. Cool. So what are the next steps for your project?
So
you want to give us an outlook?
Yeah, like we said, we have 15 micro frontends, and each micro frontend is basically its own Angular application. So it comes with its own Angular framework built in, so to say. So a colleague of us, Byron, went out and analyzed it actually, and I'm just looking up the numbers. So it's actually that 82% of this bundle is like external libraries, Angular again, and dependencies, and the actual application code makes up 18%. So that's the measurement or the numbers we have there. So it's really a lot of redundancies in like what we ship to the users. That's something we are currently looking into. It's currently not really impacting the user experience. It's not that we have a public web page where we need to like load fast and otherwise the users jump away quickly. It's also not that we have to be mobile first or something. It's really an enterprise app that is used on the computer, on the Mac, in Chrome, and so the user experience impact is not that severe at the moment, but we are trying to get, so that's I guess the next challenge and that next things we are doing, like measure these performance, like the load performances and so on, to really get a sense of if we have to act soon, or so we are looking into a module federation. I think a team of a few engineers have been exploring module federation, and we are discussing like if we switch the approach or newer microfront, or if we allow module federation. But that's currently in discussion and a challenge. We are measuring like performance impact of this approach currently. Yeah, that is one of the bigger challenges we have here. So the general concept is working now for almost 2 years now for us. The tools, the libraries, like we saw, these directives and so on, they are working. It's fine. We can even like upgrade our Angular framework. And when we do an update, due to that the shell application is much bigger and slower releasing, when we do an upgrade, the micro frontends are often on the newer version than the shell, and it surprised us as well that this works. I mean, the shell is running on Angular 12 or something, and the micro frontends are already on 13. When we do the switch, it's 2 times a year that we upgrade the framework, but we don't have a downtime or anything. That's pretty nice. Which I think, if I understand it correctly, with module federation, we would have some, how we do that the different modules, the federated modules. I think, Manuel, you are way more into this. I think you have to look into it really to make not like inconsistent Angular versions, that the federated modules have different versions, but maybe you can advise us at some point there how we can circumvent.
Yeah, of course. Of course, I can send you something. So ideally, if you want to keep your flexibility of mixing and matching different versions, then you needed to also combine web components with module federation to get out the best of both worlds. But I can link a blog article about this here, and I can send it to you, of course.
Cool. Yeah,
awesome.
The other thing, I think the other challenge is just due to we worked on like 4 years on a single app. We introduced NX Workspace, and there's just still a lot of code and components that are still in the old or in the big monolithic shell applications, which we still have to extract and refactor to be able to extract it to make it reusable by the micro frontends and other teams. So that's a process that is always ongoing to refactor the code, to break or re-architect the dependencies so that you can extract the components and services to make them reusable. So that's a thing that's like the challenge from when we set out to go with NX Workspace and micro frontends to really, refactor the code into libraries. And that's an ongoing challenge since we started this endeavor.
Yeah, and not only reusable, like a lot of the libraries are also not supposed to be reused, but by extracting them into libraries, we can leverage the faster build times and test times because we have the build cache that NX allows us to use. So we really have an incentive to keep extracting into libraries because that will reduce the time we spend in GitHub workflows down the line.
Makes sense. Yeah. So in the beginning, you told us about the reasons why you chose micro frontends. You talked about separated teams that can work in an autarkic way, that are more flexible. You talked about decreasing build times. If you look back now, would you say with your approach, you managed to achieve those goals?
Yes, for sure.
Yes. The funny thing is the engineers, the front-end engineers, they love to work in those micro frontends because they npm start, it's quick. It's like a small little application that you just started developing, and versus the old thing which we have developed for years, which is like when you started, you wait 3 minutes, can go for a coffee. So every engineer asks to be in the micro frontend and develop micro frontends because it's like the developer experience is much better and you can quickly iterate locally, you can ship quickly, you can even roll back quicker. And so it's much more delightful to work in these. So I would say if the engineers are delighted, the product works, we can scale, I think this approach has achieved our objectives that we set out in the beginning.
Cool. So as you mentioned, build times, do we have some numbers how long it took before I think 2020, and how long it takes now on average for a single team to build the application or to ng serve the application?
Yeah, so the build times of micro front ends are like we have 15 of them. We are measuring them and tracking those build times. They are really consistent between 10, 15 minutes. So it's unit testing, linting, building, and deploying it to multiple regions, what we do there. The monolithic application, due to the size of it, I'm not sure, it's over 1,000, multiple thousand unit tests. Even the unit tests, they run like, I don't know, what is it?
If without NX cache, the Jest unit tests run in 50 minutes. But when we run a release, a lot of it comes from the build, from the cache. So when we release the shell application, unit tests tend to run between either 2 minutes when everything is read from cache or 30.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. So I would say
30 or 13.
So it really depends how lucky we get with the cache hits. So it could be 2 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 30. Sometimes we have no cache hits at all because our Redis that stores the cache has just been reset. Then the shell application releases within like an hour, including E2E tests and all the other things. Yeah, so
sounds good. Good. I think that sounds a bit too good. So where is the catch? Where have been the rocks on the roads towards this solution?
I mean, one rock that I still remember is Internet Explorer 11, which was a blocker because there was something with custom elements that was not supported there. I can't remember, but I know that we first had to, as a company or product organization, like tell our customers IE11 won't be supported at some point anymore. So that was like, it took, like we had to announce this half a year before we deprecated IE11 support. So that already was a blocker that took some time for us to get out of the way. And once that was out of the way, we could finally deploy the first micro front end in that, how we do it now. So that's a challenge, or was a challenge. So if people have to support Internet Explorer 11 or older browsers that don't support web component standard custom elements, that's a blocker. So that was just waiting for us to be able to deploy with that technology or to work with the technology. I think another blocker is just introducing NX and then like extracting the things into libraries to start building a second application. I mean, you could start a second one immediately from scratch, but if you have a component system or a library of components that you reuse, that you have to reuse because otherwise you break the UI consistency, then you first have to extract that. And for us, that sometimes came with lots of dependencies that had to be refactored. That was another challenge that we had to overcome.
And one thing that I'm surprised you didn't mention it yet because you were very involved in that part is getting buy-in from management. So you have the roadmap topic like, hey, we want to ship this feature to the customers, and the feature, the first web component micro frontend we shipped was actually the report navigation. That was Patrick's team. And they really said, hey, if we build this as a micro frontend, we can iterate much faster. We can be free from the existing code base. Please, we needed to give them the data to persuade them that this is worth investing the time in. And that took a lot of persuading. Or in another case, the first micro frontend we shipped, it wasn't actually a web component, but it was like a link integration. You click on a link, you are taken to a different application, which means you do not see the navigation bar at the top. And there was also like, hey, we want to build this new feature for completely new. It would be great to have this as a micro frontend. Let's product management. I will take the navigation bar away from you, and in return, you get a speedier development team. So the persuading product team to invest time into building this solution was also, I think that was actually the most important thing. Once we got rolling, like the technology, and then Fabian got productive quite quick.
Yeah, I mean, the initial, you don't know what you are getting into. Does it work? Are there some setups, browser setups, that wouldn't work, or where the approach wouldn't work? So it was a bit of an unknown, but the first microphone was then at some point finally rolled out, and we saw how quickly the engineers could then iterate on that microphone and work. And since then, it was just we have to get the next microphone, and the next team has to start working in that sense. So just the initial uncertainty in the topic, and does it work? Does it work for every customer and user in their browser or setup, whatever it is? But once we overcame that, it kept rolling, and by now we have 15 microfrontends in 2 years.
Yeah. Wow. So this sounds like in the beginning you have to invest a bit into making sure everyone is in the boat and everyone understands how to use those libraries, perhaps even into writing some infrastructure codes, those shared libraries. But then you benefit from it because you get quicker, you can work in an autarkic way, and you have even faster build times. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to add to that, like if you go for this web component strategy, don't do it if you're less than 10 developers. Then you don't, I really don't think you're going to need it. When you have many teams that can be blocking each other and communication gets harder, that's when you need this sort of thing. Other than that, one Angular application with lazy loaded routes is the easiest thing to pull off, or you go straight with, I think that's all my expertise allows me to say.
Awesome. Yeah, you are speaking right from my heart. A last question. If you look back, what would you do differently if you would do it again?
I mean, one thing that I still would like to do differently is like, I think with the introduction of NX, there's like from the now novel team, they have a PDF or ebook where they have like guidance how you should structure the libraries with features and shared and data access. And we read that, and I think we added a bit of our own things to it and over-engineered in the beginning. So I think we had a lot of tagging rules and still have them, like out of like historical reasons. I mean, maybe in the beginning, the first 2, 3, 4 engineers that thought about how to do this, they still understand it and know how it was meant to be. But if you then, like we did, scale like from 3 teams and 10 engineers to like 8 teams and 40 engineers, it's not obvious to everyone anymore what the tagging rules are. So I would say with the introduction of NX, at least, which is like was the step before introducing micro frontends and web component-based micro frontends, keep it simple as always in software development. I think keep it simple, and that's what we, I think, didn't do because we thought like, we have to like restrict this dependency from happening, that people use shared or whatever, and we overdid it. I would say I would, if I would redo it again, probably keep it simple, so that everyone understands the rules, applies them consistently, and that it scales better, because at the moment it feels like some understand it, some don't, and it's hard to get out of this again because you have to otherwise refactor a lot. And another thing that you...
So after we shipped caching for our entry point bundles, so if I would start over now, I know the solution now, I would just do caching right from the start because it's a easy trick to get better performance with single bundle web components. Definitely start with caching right away, and have a small meta JSON file. that is the uncached entry point to get a little bit more performance.
Cool. Yeah, this all sounds awesome. And yeah, I really feel you if you say it's about finding the sweet spot between over and under engineering and taking care about other things upfront, like about caching. Awesome. Yeah, this is a really nice case study. I see there a lot of patterns and practices that are valuable for other people too. So thanks for coming today. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, your experience with us.
Thank you. Always welcome.
Yeah, and big thanks to you as well to driving this topic in the community. I think you are the micro front-end person in the Angular community, and you maintain NGX Build Plus, which also made it possible for us in the first place. So kudos to you, and yeah, thanks for having us today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for this feedback. Thanks for coming, and see you around. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.